You paid too much for something today. You might not know it yet, but somewhere between opening your wallet and walking away, your brain made a decision that had almost nothing to do with the actual value of what you bought. Here is what nobody tells you. The price you think is fair was never calculated by you. It was calculated for you. And the mechanism that decides what feels cheap or expensive is so deeply buried in how your mind works that even knowing about it barely protects you from it. It started in 1974. Two psychologists named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky ran an experiment that should have been embarrassing for everyone involved, including the participants. They spun a wheel in front of a group of people. The wheel was rigged to land on either 10 or 65. Then they asked those same people, what percentage of African countries are in the United Nations? The people who saw 65 on the wheel guessed much higher than the people who saw 10. A completely random number, spun on a wheel, changed what people thought was a factually correct answer. Kahneman and Tversky called this anchoring. The idea is almost insulting in its simplicity. Whatever number your brain sees first becomes the invisible reference point for every number that follows. You do not choose your reference points. They are handed to you. Now apply that to every price tag you have ever seen. When a store shows you a jacket marked down from $400 to $180, your brain does not ask, is $180 a fair price for this jacket? It asks, is $180 a good deal compared to $400? The original number, which may have been invented purely to manipulate you, has already done its job. It became the anchor. The comparison is between two numbers the store chose, not between the jacket and your actual needs, your actual budget, or the actual cost to produce it. This is not a new trick. In the 1940s, a diamond company called De Beers ran one of the most successful marketing campaigns in history. They did not sell diamonds by explaining what diamonds were worth. They anchored them to a number most people had never spent on anything in their lives: 2 months of your salary. They invented that rule. There was no historical tradition behind it, no economic logic. They simply said it enough times that it became the reference point an entire generation used to judge whether they were proposing correctly. 2 months' salary became the anchor, and everything measured against it felt generous or cheap. And here is the part that should bother you most. Once an anchor is set, your brain defends it. Researchers at MIT found that people who wrote down the last 2 digits of their social security number before bidding in an auction consistently bid more if their last 2 digits were higher. A person whose social security number ended in 97 paid nearly twice as much for the same item as someone whose number ended in 11, twice as much for a number that appeared on a government document and had no relationship to the product whatsoever. Your brain treated it as information. It was not information. It was noise. But the anchor stuck anyway. That is what makes this so different from ordinary irrationality. It is not that you make a mistake once and learn from it. The anchor rewires the frame before the decision even begins. By the time you are weighing whether something is a good deal, the question itself has already been answered for you. Think about the last time you were in a restaurant with a menu that had one outrageously expensive item on it. A $200 steak. A $150 bottle of wine. Most people never order those items, but the restaurants are not stupid for putting them there. They are not hoping you order the expensive thing. They are using it to make everything else on the menu feel reasonable. The lobster at $80 feels like a bargain next to the $200 steak. The $40 pasta feels almost responsible. The anchor at the top of the menu does not need to sell. It just needs to exist. A behavioral economist named Dan Ariely tested this at MIT with his own students. He put 3 subscription options in front of them. Web only for $59, print only for $125, print and web together for $125. Almost nobody chose print only. It was obviously terrible value. But when Ariely removed the print only option and tested again, the most popular choice shifted. Without the decoy, people moved away from the expensive bundle. The bad option had not been bad at all. It had been structural. It existed to make one specific choice look inevitable. This pattern has a name now. Behavioral economists call it the decoy effect. And once you see it in airline seats, car trim levels, streaming plans, gym memberships, and every software pricing page on the internet. The option that nobody buys is not a mistake. It is the mechanism. But here is where it gets stranger. Anchoring does not just work on prices you see. It works on prices you remember, prices you imagine, and prices you have never encountered at all. A researcher named Brian Wansong from Cornell ran a study where people were offered soup refills at a restaurant. Some tables had regular bowls. Some tables had self-refilling bowls, engineered to slowly replenish themselves from a hidden tube under the table. The people with self-refilling bowls ate 73% more soup than the people with regular bowls. And here is what they reported afterward. They felt less full, and they estimated they had eaten less. Their sense of how much they had consumed was anchored to how much soup remained in the bowl, not to any signal from their own body. The bowl was the reference point. When it never emptied, their brain concluded they had barely started. Your sense of value works the same way. When the reference point is wrong, Everything measured against it is wrong. You are not calculating value. You are measuring distance from an anchor someone else placed. This is why luxury brands almost never discount. Not because discounting would hurt their profits in the short term, because discounting would destroy the anchor. A Hermes bag at 30% off is not a good deal on a bag. It is a bag that is no longer 30% expensive. It is a bag that just told your brain the anchor was negotiable. And once an anchor is negotiable, it is no longer an anchor. It is just a number. The entire pricing strategy collapses, which brings you to something uncomfortable. Think about what you believe is an appropriate amount to spend on rent, on groceries, on a car, on a wedding. These beliefs feel like conclusions. They feel like things you figured out through experience and reason. But most of them were handed to you by the city you grew up in, by what your parents spent, by the first apartment you ever saw listed, by the first car your family owned. The anchor was set before you knew to question it, and every subsequent decision you made about value was measured against it. Researchers studying housing markets in the 1980s noticed something strange. In cities where home prices spiked quickly, new arrivals, people who had never lived there before, consistently overpaid compared to longer residents. They had no anchor, so they adopted the one the market gave them, whatever homes were currently listed for. The current listing price became the reference point, which meant rising prices felt like rising value rather than rising debt. The anchor itself was inflated, and no one could see it from inside the market. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002, in part for the anchoring work he and Tversky did nearly 3 decades earlier. When asked what he had personally done differently after a lifetime of studying these biases, he said something almost deflating. He said he was no better at catching himself than anyone else. He could name the bias. He could describe its mechanism in detail. But in the moment of a decision, the anchor still worked on him. Knowing the trick, he said, does not make you immune to it. That is the final layer. You can read everything ever written about anchoring. You can understand the psychology, the neuroscience, the evolutionary origins of why your brain uses comparison, instead of absolute judgment. And then you can walk into a car dealership and watch all of it dissolve in front of a monthly payment figure someone chose for you. Because the anchor is not a logical error. It is a feature. For most of human history, comparison was the right strategy. You did not need to know the absolute value of a fish. You needed to know if it was more or less than yesterday's price. Comparison is fast, efficient, and almost always good enough. The problem is that someone figured out how to engineer the thing you are comparing to. So the next time something feels like a deal, stop for 1 second and ask a different question. Not, is this cheaper than the original price? Ask, what is the original price doing in my head right now? Because the answer will almost always be the same. It got there before you arrived. It was placed exactly where it needed to be, and it has been quietly deciding what feels cheap and what feels expensive ever since. The price you think is fair was never yours to begin with.